Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second PNW Affliction book, The Barless Prison, an urban survival, oh boy, we're off to a good start. Urban survival story by Chance Paladin, 2019, copyright. All rights reserved, no portion of this book may be reproduced in any form without permission from the author, except as permitted by U.S. copyright law. This is a work of fiction. Named characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living, dead, or actual events are purely coincidental. Content advisory is as follows. I write post-apocalypse stories. Therefore, portions of these stories are intended for mature audiences. Romance level. There is about as much romance as you would expect in a typical post-apocalypse scenario. Explicit sexual acts were included are germane to the story and not intended to be gratuitous or fetishized. Cursing. There isn't any really hard swearing worse than what you hear on cable. Violence. There is a moderate range of violence as would be expected in a post-apocalypse story. However, the suffering aspects are not deliberately glamorized or embellished upon. Forward. People always ask why I do what I do. What changed my mindset to not simply sit and wait? Some people do it for their kids. Some people do it for their country. Some people were simply raised that way. I could dismiss it, or I could simply have a fair response, depending on the person when they would say, I'm coming over to your house when the shit hits the fan. Depending on who it was, I would simply chuckle or tell them to announce themselves and to bring as much as they could if they were someone I would welcome, or to tell them to go to hell. These are all people with plenty of time to plan meals, garden, get educated, and live sustainably, but still, I could look past all that. My moment was somewhere around the fourth or fifth person to literally tell me to my face that they would come to my house and kill and eat my cats if they were starving. That logic bothered me for two reasons. The first is that I always make sure my cats have enough food to last. The second is that my cats are carnivores. Chapter 1. Wake Up. Almost 2 years after the collapse. The autumn. I had slept for a few hours or so before my cat started opening the cabinet door about an inch and then letting it bounce shut. Then she would open the cabinet door about an inch and then let it bounce shut, simply to hear it bonk rapidly on the rubber nubs it had. I opened my eyes a bit, closed them again, opened them again, and realized and remembered I wasn't in my room at all. Well, not in the room in my house, anyway. It's been 2 years since the collapse. I was in that damn prison now. There was no cat bonking on a cabinet door. It was someone bordering on lunacy with nothing else to do. That was XXL bonking on the cabinet. I had no clue if he was acting crazy intentionally or not, or if there was even a difference. I decided to leave him alone for now. XXL noticed I had finally stirred through, nodded, and quietly whispered, "Hey, XDS," so nobody would hear. We all had code names and nobody knew each other's real names. We shed them all when we got caught and locked up here by the other side. I could hear tormented screams coming down the hall as usual, with never a clue as to why, the rumors being of course test subjects for who knows what. People would return to their cells more scared and fearful than before. Well, I call them cells, but they're more like cubbies, I guess, or nooks. I don't know, basically the rooms don't have doors. Technically we're free to leave whenever we want, but nobody ever can or does. At that moment, sounds of stark raving terror attached to a person run down the hallway. After him, 3 people in all black, nearly light absorbent clothing move in pursuit, pick up the person who curled in a ball and carried him back down the hallway from the direction he came. Whatever the guy saw in his mind, it must have been horrible. Chapter 2. Not Making the Cut. Psycho Prison, Day 1. XXL stopped bonking on the cabinet door and looked at me, nonplussed. I don't know, I responded back to him. I know only as much as you do. There was some very happy ocean mammal noises going on outside, which sounded like an arf or an erp. Double XL bounded up on a makeshift stool so he could see out his window and relayed back what he saw. The security team was apparently carrying the balled-up guy to the SEALs. Double XL got back down and didn't finish the rest. A few final screams as the poor terrified man was eaten alive in unison with more delightful arfing and erping from the SEALs. A terrible way to go, but at least he's free from this place. The SEALs had become extremely overprotected before the collapse and promptly overbred and ate up all the fish ever since the other side had declared them official federal marine animal. Since then, the creature had become quite unnaturally diet-specific to this region over 2 generations of their breeding and seemed to prefer us. This fact made them very diligent guard dogs here now. Double XL didn't say anything, and I didn't either. I wasn't sure what his emotional capacity was, and so, for his mental health, but also not to push whatever his act was, decided to leave him be. A guy in the cubby across from us, who we call XPX, always sat in his black pants, black t-shirt, and his black, large, heavy leather coat and looked at the floor. They carted him away every day like the rest of us. He went peacefully, and then he would come back and stare for hours at the floor. They wouldn't fight him, and he wouldn't fight them either. He was old enough now to be what would have passed for one of the anarchists then, but he wouldn't be in this prison if that was the case. Being an anarchist and getting caught would have been in a real one, and would have been let out a long time ago since the other side took over. This guy had a family at some point. I hear him talk about them in his sleep. Well, I call it sleep, but nobody here really sleeps. It's all only night terrors every night anymore. Nobody knows if it's the experiments or if it's something that they do to this place. XPX suddenly says, "That guy must have failed the trials, huh?" More of a statement than a question. "Yeah, he didn't last long," I said grimly. "Maybe they got stronger stuff, or maybe the people they catch are weaker," XPX says while looking at the floor. Double XL suddenly seemed to have a thought and asked XPX, "Hey, why you always staring at the floor, man? Why don't you look up and around like the rest of us?" XPX looked up and only barely said, "My guilt. My guilt is everywhere." He slid across a laminated picture to Double XL of a smiling little girl with an E on it, and the rest of the name smudged away, and showed it to me. He said to both of us, "That's my E, my guilt. Hold it for me. I'll be back in a little bit." As if on cue, 3 orderlies in black, light-absorbent uniforms came to get XPX and peacefully take him to the lab. He looked at the ground the whole time while being escorted away toward half the screams. Chapter 3. What do I see? Day 1. Double XL wanted to know what I told them I saw them when I got taken to the lab. I never asked out of respect, but I didn't mind answering. I told them that honestly I didn't see much. This really irritated the doctors, and they always accused me of lying. The things I did see, they didn't believe me, and they said it couldn't be possible. They would want me to be truthful and honest, but then would get pissed off at me. I would try to reverse engineer what I thought they wanted, but that never made them happy either. Sooner or later, they eventually figured out I was playing them, which they were okay with, but then they would tell me to knock it off and start over. They even tried to recruit me a couple times, but I didn't do mental hospitals. I definitely also didn't do prisons, and since I knew I wasn't getting past the orderlies, the man-eating harbor seals, and the mile of Pacific Ocean back to the mainland by myself, only to be back in further held other side territory anyway, I stayed put trying to figure out the system like I always had before to get myself out of problems. Double XL kind of shrugged. I guess I'd rambled on for too long and either lost interest or didn't believe me. Around that time, XPX returned, looking around the ground as always with 3 orderlies behind him. He wiped some tears from his eyes as they left. When they were gone, Double XL slid the picture across the hallway back to XPX. He stopped with the shoe, picked it up without looking at it, and then he muttered something that sounded as appreciative as possible, then tucked it away. Our nooks didn't get tossed often, but I guess it was a process we had developed over time as a precaution.